distinguished colleagues, Mr. President, I seek your indulgence to allow me to lead this debate on this very vital national issue of power rotation, especially as it seeks to allay the fears of minority groups, especially in the states, to access power and contribute their quota to the development of our country. Mr. President. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, this bill was mentioned and read for the first time in this very revered chamber on Tuesday, 26 July 2022. Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, the one and sole intent of this bill is to enact a legislation that will seek to amend the provisions of the Constitution to provide for the rotation of power among the geopolitical zones, governorship among the senatorial districts and federal constituencies in general elections in Nigeria. This bill has become imperative considering the controversies trailing the nomination of persons for elections into various offices, especially the offices of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and governors of various states of the Federal Republic. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, let me humbly remind us that in our nation's constitution, there is what is called the federal character principle, which requires the fair and equitable representation of different ethnic and regional groups in the composition of all tiers of government. This was designed by the framers of the Constitution to ensure that there is no predominance of persons from a few states or a few ethnic groups or sectional groups in running the affairs of the country. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, one of our duties as legislators is to protect the Constitution of our dear country, Nigeria. And one way to do that is to support this bill because power rotation is a necessary lubricant that oils the federal character principle as enshrined in the Constitution. Mr. President, my very revered colleagues, in Nigeria, a multi-ethnic and diverse nation, the need to alternate power across the zones and governorship among the senatorial districts of the country cannot be overemphasized. This is because power rotation can be a veritable tool for our national integration, unity, inclusion, peace, and political stability. May I mention that for democracy to thrive anywhere, it must be adapted to suit the political reality of its environment. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, for the progress of our democracy, equity and equality should define its process. Mr. President, my highly respected colleagues, time has come for us to reach certain peculiar compromises in respect to our political reality for the sake of our cohesion as a people. And one way to achieve this is through power rotation amongst all the geopolitical zones, governorship among the senatorial districts and federal constituencies of our country. Rotation of power is the strongest antidote against secessionist threats in this country. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, certain zones and regions felt marginalized and denied political power, and this has led to emotive violence.
Ovie Omo Agege Delta Central Senatorial District. Mr. President, let me begin by saying that on a good day, I ordinarily would align myself with the intent behind this bill. Ordinarily. But Mr. President, I'm taken aback. This is not a bill for constitutional amendment. It is not a bill to amend the Constitution. It is not. I think Senator Moro ought to know very well. As my brother and colleague, alluded to earlier, the Constitution is very, very clear. To deprive somebody of the right to run for office through a provision of a piece of legislation enacted by the National Assembly, which is contrary to the provision of the Constitution, will render that very act of the National Assembly null and void as it should be. Not too long ago, we had this exercise to amend the Constitution. I would have expected, it's a good bill. It's a very, very good bill. I would have expected Moro to bring this bill, and most of us would have gone for it. But while waiting for the next opportunity, Mr. President, at least until Senator Nara spoke, I was very, very curious that everybody who was speaking and contributing were from the other side, the PDP. And I found it very, very interesting. Interesting because we in APC, we believe in the intent behind this bill. That is why after, excuse me, let me speak, I'm on the floor. That is why, Mr. President, after 8 years of President Muhammadu Buhari, all of the governors of southern Nigeria, they met in Asaba. Excuse me, I have the floor, and I have the protection of Mr. President. You know, they met, Mr. President, I'm sure I have the protection.
DSP, you are protected. Senator Beta Piafi, stop harassing the DSP, please.
In Asaba, the Delta State, all the governors, our elected governors, people were elected to govern us in the entire southern Nigeria, they all met and took a position as enshrined pretty much in this lead debate. Mr. President, not only that, our governors in the north of APC extraction also took the position as enshrined. Excuse me, I have the floor.
DSP. DSP. Yeah, you have. Okay.
The mic, So all the governors in northern Nigeria of APC extraction aligned with the position of the governors of southern Nigeria, irrespective of political parties, and supported the content of this very bill. But, Mr. President, we now know what has happened. These people here, our colleagues on the other side, Mr. President, if they are serious, the first thing they need to do is to plead with their presidential candidate to step down from the race so that power after 8 years can come to southern Nigeria in line. Mr. President, I have the floor. I have the floor, Mr. President. I have the floor. You know, that is, Mr. President, we don't need to codify. Why waiting to codify this into law? Charity begins at home. Why waiting to codify this into law? Why don't we do what is right? Why don't we do what is needful? The North haven't had power for 8 years. Power should come to the South. So they should tell their presidential candidate to step down from the race. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President and my distinguished colleagues, I am happy that I have been given opportunity to say a word or two in respect of this bill. I'm equally happy that the Senate President is a minority. Thank you very much.
To amplify this issue, we all knew that the last president of this country, President Ibele Jonathan, was equally a minority. And we never had a bill of this nature for him to emerge as president. When the framers of our constitution decided to create the various offices under the constitution and gave us a federal constitution and made prescription as to the requirement of each office created by the constitution, it was to further enhance the unity of this country. And Mr. President, you will remember that no matter how we try to allow our sentiments to drive our desire for a very united, equitable country, we equally have a responsibility to balance that with the oath of office we have taken as senators of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, i.e., to uphold, protect, and defend the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And where the Constitution specifically has prescribed the requirement for emerging into each of the offices created by the Constitution, it may be very, very difficult for this Senate to, by way of legislation, upset that provision of the Constitution. The Constitution being the grand norm of our country, we are bound by it. This is really a beautiful, beautiful pursuit, but the framers of our Constitution appear to be wiser by taking the position that they took in the insertions of those provisions to enhance our desire to live as a united country. I can tell you, Mr. President, I will be the happiest person if this bill, for example, can go through the constitutional sieving to exist as a legislation in this country. But alas, I am tied by the oath of office I have taken as a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And therefore, I'm really in difficulty to promote this bill on this floor. Mr. President, the additional danger...
So you are against it? Are you against it?
You see, sir,
You don't learn with your head.
the danger of including rotation of holding political office in our law will do a great violence to our desire to live as a united country. And democracy being a recurrent suspicion whereby more than half the people are right more than half the time, must be given the benefit of choosing their leaders at each point in time. Just like we decided in this chamber to choose you knowing fully well you are a minority. So let me respectfully say that, Mr. Senate President, not only me, this Senate cannot legislate on this matter without doing a great violence to our Constitution. Maybe this is the diplomatic way to put it. Thank you very much.
DSP.